This week in the portion of Chayei, we read about her passing. She passed away at the age of 127, and Rashi cites the Midrash Chazal regarding the juxtaposition that the Torah juxtaposes the passing of Sora Imenu to the Akedah. What do we learn from the association between the Akedah and the passing of Sora Imenu? V'nischa misa Sora l'Akedah Yitzchok. Lefisha yidei besuras Akedah shenizdamid b'no l'shchita. As a result of the tidings of the Akedah, that her son was presented to be slaughtered, and when he was about to be slaughtered, her soul left her and she passed away. It was too much for her to deal with, and this is why she expired. Her whole life was Yitzchok. At the age of 90, she had the child that she prayed for, that she took every initiative to bring about, and the level of joy which she had. The Balaturim and the Rabbeinu Bachya explain that Vayiyu, Chayei Sora, Vayiyu, numerically is 37. Although she lived 127 years, Vayiyu Chayei Sora. What was her life? Those 37 years that she spent together with her son Yitzchok. So now that Yitzchok is suddenly taken from her, which she believed he was slaughtered, she could not deal with the overwhelming pain, and therefore she passed away. The ultimate test, the most difficult test of Avraham Avinu was the Akedah. On Rosh Hashanah, which is the Yom Adin, the Day of Judgment, which God allows Satan to prosecute the record of Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people. And when he prosecutes without mercy. And Yom Adin means that you can't be perfect enough to survive his prosecution. It's the merit of the Akedah. It's the Shofar Shel Ayol which silences him. So what is the value? The ultimate, the survival of Klal Yisrael is only due to the merit of the Akedah. Satan, in the worst way, tried to intervene and put up every obstacle in the way of Avram that he should not be able to succeed, that he should not be able to even arrive at Har Moriah. We have a custom, we do tashlich. We go to a body of water and we say the 13 attributes of mercy. Mikel Kamocha. Why by a living wellspring or a river? Because when Avraham Avinu was going through the Akedah, Satan had come as a raging river to try to prevent him from going, understanding that if he succeeds, he's silenced forever. So we have Tashlich to commemorate that moment as he tried to obstruct. Normally, if God says, bring the son that you love was born to you in your old age, the first excuse you have to retract or to go back, you'd go back. When he was drowning in this river, what did Avram say? Ritzoni lasos ritzoncha. I want to do your will. You're not allowing me to. I'm drowning. He didn't say, I'm drowning, I'm returning. If that is your will, and that is the ultimate, what you want, I want to do your will. Even though it means slaughtering my only child. The child that's meant to be the future. It doesn't make a difference. So this is such a monumental moment in Klal Yisrael, guarantees the eternity of Klal Yisrael, at every level. Why did God allow Satan to inform Sori Menu, who was Avram's partner in everything that he did? As it said, HaNefesh Osa B'Choron, the souls that they had made in Choron, Avram Megayeres HaNoshim, V'Sar Megayeres is HaNoshim. Avram converted the males and she converted the females to monotheism. So why did he allow Satan to whisper in her ear this which caused her death. Satan, as it says in Chazal, the power, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is Satan. The Malach HaMavis, the angel of death, is Satan. The prosecutor is Satan. It's all the same power. Satan has certain leeway and certain rights which God allows him, because that's exactly his function, to ensnare, to undermine. And despite that, the challenge is to overcome all that. But it's always within your ability to overcome it, otherwise there's no free choice. If Satan is in the position that you don't stand the chance to stand up to him, so what's the point? The person is doomed to fail. Is destined to fail. There's no hope. You have the ability. As difficult as the challenge may be, you have the ability to overcome. Now, what would the challenge be if Satan now takes Sari Menu from Avram Avinu? What is the challenge? Here, Avram Avinu just achieved the ultimate, guaranteeing the destiny of Klal Yisrael. But as we once explained, it's not so simple. To beat Satan is not so simple. And you can't be too cocky when it comes to Satan. The Gemara tells us that there was an Amora that he married at the age of 16, at the age of 14, because he wanted to preempt Satan that he shouldn't be able to overtake his life, and he should have a wife to be able not to be in any way distracted, have any lewd thoughts, and his mind should be fully occupied in Torah. It should not be tainted. And he boasted that he beat Satan. When you go and you boast that you beat Satan, he'll come after you. And he used to say, like arrows into the eyes of Satan wasn't a good thing to do. Not that Avram boasted that he beat Satan here, but here he really beat him bad, because now his whole value is prosecution. We always have a defense. Even the defense is not on a personal level. It's not each person. It's something we draw from our history. It's a schus avos, the Akedah. So how could Satan somehow annul the Akedah? If Satan is able to come up, devise some kind of plan to annul that and to void it, then he succeeded. How does he do that? We have once mentioned, the Rambam writes in the laws of Tshuva, that if a person is a Rasha all his life, evil all his life, and the last moment of his life he repents, does Tshuva, when he passes away, his classification is absolute tzaddik, and his negative record is totally blotted out, doesn't appear. But simultaneously, if a person's a tzaddik all his life, devoutly righteous, and the last moment of his life, he says, I regret all the good deeds, all the mitzvos, all the Torah I studied, they will not mention not an iota of the positive record. He's annulled everything. Avram is ecstatic. He triumphed over Satan. He's coming back. Satan says, I have a surprise. Your wife died because of what she heard. So normally how would even the special person react? Hashem, is that to thank you? Here I was willing to give you more than my right and left arm, more than my right and left eye, more than my life. I was willing, I was so subjugated, subordinated to your will. So you take my wife, you allow Satan to take my wife, which is too difficult for her to deal with. Such information that her child was taken, her life was taken. So, if he would have said, Chas v'sholom, I regret that I ever got involved. I have remorse that I ever was involved in this. Because this was the thank you. If he would ever say that, Chas v'sholom, he would have undermined and nullified and voided the value of the Akedah. Then something's on top. Avram comes back, and immediately he realizes what has happened, and he understood exactly what happened. What's the first thing he does? Immediately eulogizes her. He grieves for her, Livkosa. Seeks a burial location. Not a word. He will not allow Satan in any way to touch a nerve in him. Chas v'sholem. His level of negation was, it's God's business. It's like Chizkiah HaMelech, when he saw through his divine vision that he was going to have a child, Menashe, who was evil, one of the most evil kings. He didn't participate in procreation, did not get married. And he fell into a sick bed, and he was on the brink of death. Yeshaya Novi comes to him and says, you're not leaving that sick bed because you did not procreate. That's why you're going to die. She says, how could I have a child? I saw my divine vision. It's going to be Menashe. He says, Bahadi Kapshir Achman Lamali. Don't get involved in God's private business. These are the hidden secrets of God. You must procreate. Everything else is unrelated to you. That Hashem allowed some to take Sorimeinu, that's God. That was God's decision. To allow him. It was a challenge. So every test we have, God, why you make the test so difficult? Because it's God's world. Only God knows what's in our best interest in terms of presenting challenges and tests, trials, and tribulations in terms of advancing our spirituality, because that's the whole value of life. It's only to be tested and to be able to stand up to the test. That's the juxtaposition of what? Of the passing of Sorimeinu to the Akedah. Vayova Avram Lisfo, the servant of Koso. Avram came to eulogize Sarah and to cry for her. So the chaf in Lefkosa is a small chaf. Why is it small? It's clear. It's to minimize the crying. He did not cry sufficiently for her. How could he not cry sufficiently for her? Secondly, normally a person cries, then he eulogizes. A person, God forbid, hears that his wife passed away. He's broken. He's devastated. He cries. And then when he gathers his thoughts and he has some degree of composure, he's able to say the eulogy. The Torah says no. Lisfo de Sarah Lefkosa. He first eulogized and then he cried. And the crying was a minimal. It was within limits. It wasn't unlimited crying. Why? I'd once mentioned in the past from the name of the Chasam Sofer, the son of the Chasam Sofer. He writes, as a human being is an intellectual being, an emotional being. If one's emotion is charged at a level which is the maximum level, in the positive sense. Avraham Avinu, when he was coming back from the Akedah, he knew exactly what he achieved. He's coming back with Yitzchak, alive. There's going to be a future Jewish people. Initially, as the Midrash tells us, what was the test of the Akedah? Not whether he would slaughter, whether he would not slaughter. The test of the Akedah was, God originally says that son that you're going to have is going to be like the stars of the heaven. He's the future. He's the future patriarch. God says to Avram, bring him up as a sacrifice, as a burnt offering. How do you reconcile the two? You can't reconcile the two. So he should say, he could have said to Hashem, but you told me. How do you reconcile the two statements? He did not ask the question. Avram was so negated to God, he didn't ask the question. That was the test of Avram. So now that he understands that what he achieved, and it will be a future, and Yitzchak will bring about a nation like the stars of the heaven, and there's going to be a Yaakov, and there's going to be, the world will reach its level of perfection through the chosen people, Am HaNivchar, which are his descendants. It's a level of excitement and happiness, of ecstasy, nothing compared to it. Now he hears his wife passes away. It's painful as it is. Emotionally, it's impossible to deal with the tragedy, to have sufficient capacity to come down from that high to the ultimate level of devastation. Therefore, that's what the Torah tells us, lifkosa. The crying was minimized due to what he just experienced. The obvious question is that something Torah has to tell us? What's Torah have to tell us this? Torah only shares with us things which are not obvious or very important for us to know. Why is it so important for us to know? If it would have been anyone other than Avraham Avinu, even a great tzaddik, Avram's responsibility, we say, Masa Avasim Labonim, whatever Avram did in his life, whatever Sari Menu did in her life, was invested totally for God. And Klal Yisrael is synonymous with God's glory. Without a Klal Yisrael, there is no God's glory. Without Klal Yisrael, there is no Torah. Bereshis Bara Elokim. B'shul Torah shnikas reishis, b'shul Yisrael shnikas reishis. They go hand in hand. To be able to have that level of appreciation of the value of succeeding, that there should never be a moment where Klal Yisrael's ever will be, due to auditing their record, they will be destroyed. Due to what he achieved. To have that level of appreciation, you have to have be at a very special level. A level to have no capacity, nearly, to grieve because of the level of appreciation that you have. I'll give you an example. A person wins a lottery. It's the largest lottery ever in the history of the world. $1 billion lottery. Never existed. Wins it, and he's already planned out what he's going to do with it. He's going to change the face of the world, charity-wise, tzedakah-wise, supporting Torah. Enough to bring Mashiach tomorrow. Bring the Jews back to Judaism. And he's so consumed with this special feeling. Then he gets a tragic tiding. Very difficult for him to have the capacity to process that. With that kind of money, with that kind of success, with that power, with that effectiveness, he's not able to. Avraham Avinu, it wasn't his financial accomplishments. It's all spiritual. So this is a reflection on his capacity of spirituality. What was first and foremost and beyond something that we can't even fathom, to appreciate Avram's appreciation for spirituality. Lifkosa. This is a reflection to give us an understanding of who Avraham Avinu was. That he was not his partner in life, his partner in Avodas Hashem, bringing humanity back to monotheism. Everything. Still he couldn't. Because what's it first and foremost? Klal Yisrael. Because Klal Yisrael is God's glory, synonymous with God's glory. Without them, there is no God's glory. And if something could ever prosecute to the point where we'll be destroyed, it's over. There's no God's glory. That's the value of the Torah revealing to us, that this crime was minimized. That's why the cup is small, for that reason. Avram understood the value of the Marsa Machpelah. Ephron did not. Ephron thought Avram was a fool. Thought he was a fool. Because the Midrash tells us that the cave of Machpelah initially had demons and spirits in it. No one was even able to go into that cave. Who was buried in that cave? Adam and Chava. Adam and Eve were buried there. And it was the best kept secret in the world of what that cave was. It was a cave a person would go in, they would not come out alive. And it was that people should think It's something, it's like contaminated, it's a contaminated location. Avram now comes, he's willing to pay anything for it. A king's ransom for it. Ephron, the greedy, evil-eyed person. Ephron, as Chazal tell us, is the gematria Ayin Ra. That's 400. Ephron without the Vav, which is not written in its full spelling, is Ayin Ra. That's why he charged him 400 meos, newly minted silver coins, which was considered a tremendous amount of money. He thought Avram was a fool. He's taking advantage of it. Little did he know the value of what that was. It's not that Avram Chas v'Shalom misled him, because misleading is based on what? Market value. His market value was, it was worthless, basically. Avram says, even though it's worthless, I'm willing to pay. You want to be a fool? Be a fool. Pay for it. He paid. But why did he bury Sari Menu there? So Rabbeinu Bachli says, because when the soul ascends, you could ascend in a circuitous route, or you could ascend directly. The direct path for ascent, to go up before the Kisei HaKavod, the heavenly throne of Hashem, is through the Amaras Machpelah. That's why he wanted that. So Rashi cites the Midrash. Ephron Yoshev. Yoshev, if it's written, its full spelling, there's a vav between the Yud and the Shin. Right? Without the vowels, it's read Yoshav. He's an old-time person. Osio minu shoter aleim. That day that Avram had to engage with him through this intermediary, the person Moshe Machel, he was elevated to a status of shoter. He was like an overseer, an officer in the community. He was elevated because it would have been beneath Avram's dignity to deal with somebody of a lesser stature. So God elevated him for that reason. But you realize, Ephron, what did he think? Why was he appointed? He probably even became more self-centered when he was elevated. Little did he know, he was only elevated only in the merit of Avram. That's why he was elevated. They negotiate. The Baal HaTurim cites a midrash that in this portion of the negotiation to purchase the Maras Machpelah, B'nei Ches is mentioned 10 times. 10 times. So he explains, Yud Tomim B'nei Ches B'Parsha. In this particular portion, small portion, B'nei Ches, the sons of Ches, they were the negotiators, they were the intermediaries. B'nei Ches are mentioned 10 times. Why? One who is able to facilitate the acquisition of a Talmud Chacham, God values it like he's filled the 10 Commandments. What role is that to the 10 Commandments? Sheish b'hem yud tomim ches. Letter ches. Ches is mentioned 10 times in the Aseret Dibros, 10 Commandments. So there's the ches sounds the same letter. So whoever facilitates the acquisition of Talmud Chacham, it's as if he fulfilled Aseret Dibros. Why? What is it? What role is that Aseret Dibros? 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments, what we call the Decalogue, it contains, based on illusionary levels, all the Torah mitzvos. The representation of the Torah in its entirety. Now, when we speak about who is a Talmud Chacham, who is a Talmud Chacham? A person who is a Torah scholar, is that a Talmud Chacham? So the Gemara tells us that we find what was a repository for the Torah? The Aron, the Ark in the Mishkan, which was in the Holy of Holies. And the Torah tells us that when Moshe Rabbeinu was told, and he transmitted this to Betzalel, to make the Oron mibayis u'michutz tetzapenu. From the inside and from the outside, it should be cast in gold. What do we learn from this? So the Gemara says, Kol Talmid Chacham shein tocho kibari ino Talmid Chacham. Talmid Chacham who's not genuine, that what he looks like on the outside, he's on the inside, that means he's fully consistent in all aspects of Torah. That's a Talmid Chacham. It's not a person who has instantaneous recall from all parts of the Torah. That's not what a Talmid Chacham is. It's a person who's truly consistent in his behavior, in his thought, in every aspect of his life, that all conforms with Torah. That's a Talmid Chacham. So whoever facilitates the acquisition of such a person, God says, I value that as if you fulfilled the 10 Commandments, the Torah's entirety. Rosh Hashanah Baruch Hu used to say, the Gemara tells us in Shabbos, that Kol HaMis'atzil V'Hespedol Shel Chacham, person who's lackadaisical regarding eulogizing a Talmid Chacham, Roy L'Kovra B'Chayev, he deserves to be buried alive. Why? So the Gemara cites an incident when Yeshua ben Nun passed away. The Zekanim, the elders of the generation, they did not eulogize him properly. And the Gemara quotes a verse. It says, the mountain moved and was going to just cover them over. So from there we were able to learn that if a person does not eulogize a Chacham sufficiently, properly, accordingly, based on who he really is, to depict his true value, he deserves to be buried alive. So we see this from Yeshua ben Nun. So my Rosh Hashanah Baruch Hu used to always say, we find that at Sinai, when Hashem offered us the Torah, we said, Nasa v'nishma. We accept unequivocally. And all of a sudden, we find we're under the mountain. And God's giving an ultimatum. Either you accept or be buried under the mountain. But we already said yes. Why is God putting the mountain over our heads? So the Midrash Tanchum explains that we said yes, that was on Torah Shebechsav. But Torah Sheba'al Peh, but the oral law, the oral transmission, we weren't so willingly eager to accept, because if there's a tremendous amount of investment and dedication and sacrifice, we weren't willing. God says, either you accept or you can be buried under the mountain. Now, the written law, that's a text. You don't even need a teacher. You understand Hebrew, you can understand what the words mean. But the oral law, that's transmission. That's what we call Masorah. For that you need the Rebbe. That you need the Talmid Chacham. So, when is a person a beneficiary of the teachings of a Talmid Chacham? If you value him sufficiently. What happens if you don't value him sufficiently? The transmission doesn't happen. The tradition is not revered and respected. So therefore, if just as at Sinai, because they were not willing to accept the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law, what would have been the consequence? To be buried on the mountain. So if you don't eulogize the Talmid Chacham sufficiently, properly, and depict him as what he truly is, he deserves to be buried. Because based on the degree of reverence, that's the degree that you're going to actually accept and embrace his transmission. That's a royal cover b'chaim. There's a famous Gemara, Mishnah, that there was a Jew, he was a Tana, his name was Shimon HaMsuni. Shimon HaMsuni, the word S has no translation. S is always, it's associated with whatever the subject matter is being discussed. S means it's an adjunct. It's an association. Now, so he interpreted his whole treatise, his life treatise, his magnum opus of his life was that every S in the Torah he went and he explained exactly what the adjunct was in that particular context. And he's about finished. His life's work. He comes to a pasuk in the Torah verse, Es Hashem Elokecha Tira. You should revere God. So what does S indicate? That there's someone else which you should revere equally as you revere God. When he came to this point, he made a declaration. Keshem shekibalti schar ha'adrisha, kahani mekabel schar al ha'prisha. Just as I was worthy for reward for interpretation of the Torah, I will receive reward for retracting all that I had said, because this confirms that everything was a mistake. He was willing to back down and turn away and admit that this is all baseless. S doesn't necessarily mean what he said it means, that it's an adjunct associated with what it's associated with, because what could be the equivalent of fearing God? The fearless Rebbe Kiva, who's Oika Horim V'tochnazu Bezu, he opens mountains and grinds them together, says, there's no reason to retract. S comes to say, God says, I want you to revere the Torah sage no less as you to revere me. And it remained that way. And that's what it's alluding to, the S. So the Maral of Prague goes to explain, why does God want you to revere the Torah sage as you revere him? What is the value of Torah sage? He's the transmitter of Torah Sheba'al Peh. The Rambam writes that a Rebbe who teaches students, a teacher of Torah, he's not permitted to act with levity in the presence of the students. He's not permitted to eat and drink in the presence of the students. The student is not permitted to go to the bathhouse with the teacher. He's not permitted to be there while the teacher has a haircut. Because if the student sees the Rebbe on his own level as the mere mortal, this will undermine the reverence, and he will not be as receptive to revere the person to value his teachings. Therefore, it will minimize the effect of the transmission between the Rebbe and the student, the teacher and the student. Therefore, Hashem says, the only way it's possible to know God is only through the Torah itself. God bless America. In God we trust. Therefore what? But I'll do what I want. How do you have a sense of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? How do you have a sense of God's dimension of being infinite? Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivonu. You have to be sanctified through the mitzvos. To be sanctified through the Torah. Talmud Torah keneged kulam. It's only through the engagement of that entity of holiness. Ner mitzvah Torah or. What's the illuminator? What gives us a grasp and understanding? How do you understand the infinite? It's impossible. We have limitation. We're finite. You have to merit a siyata d'shmaya, a divine assistance, to have a semblance of something to even relate to what that is. That only comes through Torah mitzvahs. Only. There's a famous midrash in the introduction to Echo. It says the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of three cardinal sins: Gila Rashvit Hasdam Avodah Zorah, murder, adultery, idolatry. So we read in Echo, where Yirmiyah writes, is the author of Echo, V'Torosi Ozovu, they abandoned my Torah. Halavai osi ozovu v'Torasi shemaru. If they would have abandoned me, but at least they would have studied the Torah. Shemor sheba mas lamuta. There's an enlightenment in Torah that engaging in that, it brings clarity. It gives you a sense, and you would have come back to yourself. Because they even abandoned that, they were totally in the dark. They had no relevance. The rabbis Talmid Chacham, because to the degree that you revere the teacher, the Talmid Chacham, who's Tochel Kebaro, who's a proper representation of what Torah is, that will be the degree that you're going to fear God. That's Hashem Lokech Latira. The one who facilitates the acquisition of the Talmid Chacham, it's like you fulfill the 10 Commandments. Because without that Talmid Chacham, there is no 10 Commandments. It means nothing. It's called a Decalogue. What's a Decalogue? You know, Lahavdil, you have a World Series, you have a Decalogue. You know, how many stars are on the American flag? So you have a Decalogue. You know, you have so many this and you have so many that. It all means nothing. It's all purely words. So how do you understand what the Seres HaDebris is, Lahavdil, from anything else? Talmid Chacham. So if you facilitate the acquisition of the Talmud Chacham, it's Kilukim Aser Sadibros. The Ramchal writes, in the world to come, you have people who are considered leaders and people who are literally what we call, they just get in just under the wire into the world to come. And based on what you did in this world. And the leaders is because they were fully invested in spirituality. But what about the lesser person was integral to accommodate the greater spiritual person? And only due to that person's participation in assisting that greater person was able to be not distracted from the service of God, that lesser person is elevated to the more advanced level. Of course, the person, there's a linkage. And the person was integral to be involved in that person's process of advancement of spirituality. So the person who facilitates the acquisition of the Talmud Chacham, Kilukim Aser Sadibros. And what's the confirmation on that? The linkage. The word Ches, the letter Ches is mentioned 10 times. To go back to B'nai Ches, because the B'nai Ches facilitated. And how did the negotiation go? You're a prince of God. They bowed. It was public knowledge. There wasn't a T and an I that wasn't dotted regarding this contract of the Marsa Machpelah. The Torah says when the contract was finally drawn up and the transfer took place, the Torah says, "Vayokom stei Ephron asher b'machkelo asher lefnei Mamre," and the field of Ephron, which is in the Machpelah, in the double-leveled structure, the field, the cave, the trees, and its boundaries is Vayokom. So Rashi explains what's Vayokom. Takum Hoyselo. It assumed an elevated status. Vayokom means it was established, it was transferred. Takum Hoyselo. Shiyotzim Yad Hedjot Yad Melech. It was transferred from the domain of a commoner into the domain of a king. Why? Why is that important for us to know? We find that Yaakov Avinu, when he was going to Aram Naharaim to Lavan, he was fleeing, so he stopped off on Har Moriah. And the Torah tells us, "Vayikach mi'avnei hamokom." He took from the stones of the location, put them around his head. So he took many stones. The next morning he wakes up, it says, "Vayikach ha'even." So Rashi cites Chazal, the Medrash, the Gemara, that the stones were fighting among themselves. Olai yiniach tzadik rosho. Let the tzaddik place his head on me. So what did God do? He caused all the stones should be fused together and became one stone. Sounds like childish. Stones were fighting. Sounds like almost like, fairy tales. Chas v'sholom. What does it mean? So the Ramchal explains, and just with a little bit of embellishment, that everything in existence exists due to God's will it should exist. Even the inanimate, even the granule of sand. So the basis for its existence is what? Is the Word of God. Now why does God will existence? For the sake of His glory. Now, who represents God's glory? The tzaddik. Yaakov Avinu, who was the most special of the patriarchs especially. There was nothing in this world that he didn't utilize for God's glory. Now he needs stones to place around his head to protect himself. And where is he going? he's going to establish a Klal Yisrael. The majority of the tribes, the Shiftiko, were born in Choron by Lavan. So what is the value of a stone? The value of the stone is to accommodate the tzaddik, whatever that is. So if that is the ultimate value, whatever lies within the stone that gives it value automatically is activated. And therefore the stones, they fought among themselves. Do you know what it means that Sori Menu should be buried in the Maris Machpelah? What's the value of the cave? What's the value of anything which is mundane and material? Its value is how it's being used within a spiritual context. Sori Menu, she should be buried there. And Avram should be buried there. It's fulfilling its value, its purpose of whatever it is. And what's the value of the field? What's the value of the trees? That's all part of the association. So this is truly Vayokov. Entering into Avram's domain is an elevation. Because now it has relevance to achieving its original purpose. We find when Yaakov Avinu says to his children, I want you to bury me in the Maris Machpelah, he's very specific. And he says that was purchased by Avram. It's an uncontestable site. Nobody will say this burial site belongs to anybody but them. And that's the reason why, as the commentators explain, this was done in public view over here. This was public knowledge. That Avram purchased it, and it's rightfully his. This can never be ever contested. So, what does that mean? That this is exclusive only for the usage of this caliber person. So this is true of Vayoko. At this juncture, it went from an ordinary level, a mundane, physical level, to a spiritual level. The words which Chazal use, miyad hejud liyad melech, from a commoner's domain to a king's domain. But what does that mean? It means it's a different dimension of reality. I'm not talking about a mortal king. We had mentioned in the past that based on the Mishnah, Pirkei Avos, Asar Maimoros Nivra Olam, the world was created through the 10 utterances of Hashem. 10 utterances. Now, what was the objective of the 10 utterances? The objective is Bereshis Baruch Elokim, Bishvil Torah Shnikus Reishis, Bishvil Yisroel Shnikus Reishis. The manifestation of all existence is that. Now, what is Torah? How does Torah present itself? Seres Adibros. Everything reflects, the Aseret Maimoros is specifically for that purpose. The Aseret Adibros is the encapsulation of the Torah in its entirety. That's what it is. Of course, the breakdown, the components, you have 613, 240 positive commandments, 365 negative commandments. But the totality is the Aseret. Aseret Adibros. That's what it is. 10 makos, 10 plagues, 10 tests. Avram was tested with 10 tests. What was the value of that? That to establish him to be the Av of Klal Yisrael, that's a solid foundation, what we call the launching pad. That he is the Masa of a similar bonim, that ultimately everything should evolve from there. To address it, that should be able to stand at Sinai, to be able to say Nasa v'nishma. That's what Avram Avinu, his famous word from Chaim Volozhino. Throughout history, the reason why Jews, we know that normally the Torah says whenever there's a question of one's life is in jeopardy, human life, our lives take precedence and overrides the Torah, supersedes the Torah. However, there are times of Kiddush Hashem. A Jew has an obligation to sanctify his life. For the 3 cardinal sins, or if it's a Shas Hashmad, where they're out to uproot Judaism, even for a custom, like the Gemara tells us, that if Jews wear black booted straps, and the Gentiles wear red booted straps, and they legislate a law that even the Jews must wear the strap of the non-Jew, You have to give your life. Because the whole idea is to what? To assimilate, cause us to assimilate. To remove, to sever our connection to Torah. That's the whole objective. Who else not give his life to Hashem? Now, where does a person have that ability to have an emotional, internal understanding of its value and be ready to forfeit his life? Which we see throughout history. Millions of Jews gave their lives to sanctify Hashem's name, whether it was during the Crusades, throughout history. So he explains Rav Chaim Volozhiner in his commentary on Pirkei Avos that because Avraham Avinu did not bow to the idol and he went into the fiery kiln in Kasdim, we being his descendants have that ability to give our lives to sanctify God's name. He implanted within our neshama and that within our spiritual gene pool certain abilities. By Shonim, the Jewish conscience, Rachmanim, we have compassion, Gomli Chasodim. This is all that he implanted within his neshama, and we being his not only biological descendants, his spiritual descendants, we possess that. Asar Maimoros. Avraham Avinu was tested with 10 tests. Because how did it manifest itself? How do you address? How does that actualize itself? Avraham has to withstand those 10 challenges. He does. He's talking about going further. Okay. Now, who's the next patriarch? Yitzchak. You can't have a patriarch unless you have a matriarch. It has to be a proper wife. Avraham summons Eliezer to take a wife only from his family, not from the daughters of Canaan. The slave took 10 camels from the camels of his master. What does it mean? If he took 10 camels, what did he steal the camels? I mean, it was obvious because Avram's camels were muzzled and they had eye covers that they shouldn't graze in anybody else's grazing fields, only from ownerless grazing land. But it was 10. It should have said, Vayikach Evet, Gemalim, Gemali Adonav. It's important for us to know whether it's 10 camels or 20 camels or 8 camels. Why does Torah have to go out of its way to tell us the number? The answer is the same answer. What was the objective of this mission? To find the matriarch. And it had to be the right woman. Because only through the Ab and Aim, the major patriarch, and the three, are we going to establish a Klal Yisrael who are going to be at a level to have a capacity to say Nasa v'Nishma. Therefore, the Torah goes out of its way to tell us there were 10 camels, and Avram understood, and that's why he adjured him to take an oath, Eliezer, that if he should do anything differently than he's commanded, then he's charged. He forfeits his physical world and the world to come. Forfeits everything. That's how important this is. Everything stands on this. Existence, whether it goes forward, doesn't, depends on this mission right now. Well, Eliezer picks the right wife for Yitzchak. Just like to conclude, we find the Torah is so exacting in the number of words it uses when it expresses anything. Even to learn a halacha, sometimes it would write a letter, and from that extra letter we're able to draw and extrapolate certain laws. And yet, the story, the interchange between Eliezer and Avram is repeated many times, 3 times. And what happened? The interchange with Eliezer and Rivka's father and his brother Lot, Lavan, Besuel, all of them. And what they said, and he repeats it. And the Midrash uses a very interesting language. How many quills have been broken on this story? How much ink has been spilt on this story? But evidently, it's an important story. This narrative, it's important for us to know all aspects of this narrative. That's why it's repeated. Meaning, to learn halacha, if even a letter is sufficient to extrapolate to a law, it's enough. But if somehow you have to communicate a value and understanding, sometimes the narrative has to be repeated and written in a lengthy way. So evidently, and why? What do we learn from this? We learn from here, Yofa sichosen shel avdi avos yosim mitorosen shel banim. That a sicha means ordinary talk. That the ordinary conversation of the avdi avos, of the slaves, the servants, that's slaves of the patriarchs, of value to a greater degree to Hashem than to Rosh Hashanah, than the Torah which was given over to his children, to Hashem's children, to the Jews. Why? Why is it Yofas Sichos Shalav Yovos Mitoros Hashanah? What's the reason? So we'll try to do it quickly. Firstly, who was Eliezer? Eliezer, we find, when he went to battle with the 4 kings, it says he took his men with him, 318 men. Eliezer numerically is 318. So all those miracles to defeat the 4 mighty powers, who was his partner in arms? It was Eliezer. Over there he's referred to as Damascus Eliezer. Damascus. I mean, the Torah tells us whether he came from Damascus or he came from Alexandria. What difference make where he came from? Right? Mm-hmm. Or he came from Aleppo. Does it really make a difference? What's Damascus? So the Gemara tells us Damascus is an acronym. He would draw from the well springs of his teacher, of his master's Torah, and he would disseminate it similarly as Avram would disseminate it. And the Midrash says that all Avram had learned, he had taught Eliezer. He was his mentor student in Torah and spirituality. That was Eliezer. That's firstly. So spiritually speaking, he was something unusual, exceptional. V'yoma Avram el Abdo. Avram says to his slave, not a servant, his slave, his chattel, the Khan Beso, the elder of his household. He had a very large household, Avram, very wealthy man. Hamoshe b'chol hashelo. He dominated, he oversaw all his assets, all his affairs. This is Eliezer. What does that mean? General Motors is meaningless compared to what he oversaw. He ran the equivalent of a government. All the world's affairs he would oversee and interact. He was the ambassador to the world, ambassador to many things. He says to him, Simno Yotcha Tasarechi. He wants him to take an oath regarding who that wife should be for Eliezer. His credentials, Eliezer's credentials, were something, even a small part of his credential, was something to be amazed and overwhelmingly impressed with. And it's multiples of that. And whenever Eliezer presents himself, never does he ever introduce himself as, I am Eliezer. I am the one who oversees my master's affairs. Eved Avram Anochi. I am a slave of Avram, my master. Whenever he prayed to God, he'd say, you're going, you want to prove something, that you should succeed in your mission. Allow me to succeed. Avram's request should be fulfilled. Never. There was a level of negation and humility, a man of that caliber, of that dimension of ability. It's unheard of. What does that mean? What do we learn from this? You know, the way a person, the Gemara tells us that if you want to evaluate a person, it's kiso, bekoso, bakaso. You look at these 3 things. It's pakadok. First, what do you spend money on? Do you flaunt your wealth? Are you a miser? Are you this or that? Bekoso, how do you drink? When you drink wine, do you gulp the wine like a glutton? Do you sip it like an arrogant, pompous, self-centered person? Or you drink it normally the way a normal person? Picasso, anger. When do you get angry? Do you get angry? To what degree do you get angry? Over what do you get angry? You look at these 3 things, you have a person pretty much understood. You have them identified. Shlomo Melech says, Ish lefi malolo. How do you identify a person's value? Listen to what he praises. Famous Rabbeinu Yonah in Mishlei, Proverbs. You have to listen. He says what he praises. Here we're talking about how does he speak, not what he praises. Does he speak with the ultimate level of humility, or he's always going back, remember who I am. Don't forget who I am. It's true, Avram is the ultimate. I'm not far behind. Never. Never identifies himself. Always subsumed by Avram. Not in Avram's shadow. I don't exist. Yofes Sichos Shel Avdi Avos. So a Jew versus Hashem. We're Avdi Hashem. A Jew is God's servant. So what level of identity do we have? What is our pride? What is our value? What is the value of the endowment which we're endowed with? Eved Hashem Anochi. That's what it is. Nothing more than that. Because that's the prerequisite to everything. We say Mitoch Shloshim Bo Lishma, but what's the ultimate? To do Lishma. To act and behave selflessly. But what is that based upon? What kind of lesson do you learn from Avdi Avos? Yofes Sichosim, even the ordinary talk of the servant, of the slave, not even a servant, the slave, the chattel, whose capacity is beyond our understanding. And yet, his level of humility, negated almost to a non-existent level. Hashem says that narrative is more important to appreciate and learn and absorb than Torah Shalbonim. Because if you absorb that well and understand that well, then that will guarantee that Torah should be a special